Decorating Pages is a podcast dedicated to taking you behind the scenes of the designs of your favorite TV shows and films. Each episode, I'll be sharing design stories from some of Hollywood's most famous sets. Interviews from set decorators, production designers, directors, and actors about creating the look of TV and film, about their design inspirations, and stories that take sets from page to screen. Hello, and welcome to Decorating Pages. I'm your host, Kim Wanup. How's it going? I mean, September's half over. Isn't that crazy? What is going on? We're in a time warp or something. I don't know what's going on with time. I'm prepping this American Crime Story impeachment, which I hope you caught last week's episode with production designer Jamie McCall, because that was really good. I mean, I listened to it at least 3 times. I enjoyed it. We are prepping still. We're not shooting, I believe, till like 4 weeks, so like mid-October, and I am exhausted. This mask wearing is exhausting. I know I'm not alone. I know my crew feels the same. I don't know. I guess I must be like a heavy breather when I'm dressing or something. I didn't realize this, but I'm getting lightheaded when I am dressing. That's not good. We do take breaks and everything, but you know, you're going, and then, I don't know, I get a little lightheaded. I don't really like it, but I can't even imagine my swing guys working all day in this, like humping the furniture. I mean, construction, God bless you. I am giving you guys props. I really don't know how you're coping working in these masks. I'm just kind of over it already. You do forget that you have the mask on, but not really, because then you get this like goatee of sweat going on, like, and then you get a little mask knee. It's like, this is like a whole new vocabulary of in our world. I bet that's going to be added soon. But I don't know. I know we're all staying safe. I feel completely safe where I'm working, honestly. We're all being tested, and it's safer than going to Ralph's. You know what I mean? So other than that, shipping items, I'm telling you right now, if you're going to be on a show and you're ordering things, shipping is taking longer. So please, that's just a little tip on that. I've been lucky with a long prep on this, but it's not enough. It's never enough. I have had a couple people DM me or email me asking specific questions about working in COVID, and I am more than happy to respond and talk about anything I can help with and any experience that I'm having. So, yeah. That's been my week. I was going to go on this whole rant because of the day I had about how we all play this game with budgeting, with producers and your department and all, and I'm too tired. I'm too tired to go into a rant about being tired of being told that I don't have any money. I don't have enough man-days. I don't know. It's not worth my rant. You know what I'm going to say. Because you have it too. We all go into this all the time. We don't have money. We don't have manpower. Blah, 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 but yet, it all has to be done. We got to get it done. So, I don't know. I'm not going to go into it. Maybe if I had someone here and to go back and forth with, it would probably be better. You don't want to just listen to me. I do want to tell you that next week, I'm going to do an episode special Emmy recap with production designer James Pierce Connolly. So congrats to winners already this week. I haven't looked really yet because I'm waiting to look to see who wins. I record this on Tuesday nights for the Thursday release, so I don't really know. I don't know all the winners yet. And yeah. So if ever you think like, oh, this seems like came out today. No, I used to do it the night before, and shit got stressful. Like, if shit didn't upload, and then I was up all night trying to get it up, I've had plenty of tech problems on this, you've heard, so it doesn't just end when the mics turn off. I got problems getting this all together, so yeah. Speaking of technical difficulties, this interview you're going to listen to about the 1 hour mark, you're going to hear some babies screaming for a good 6 minutes. I'm sorry. I am so sorry. I tried all these little buttons to try to get the background noise out, and I can't do it. I'm sorry. They're literally getting a diaper change, and we're just not happy, apparently. On top of that, my neighbor is revving up his car in the driveway right next to my window, so there's a little bit of background noise in this one. I'm so sorry. But this is, this was COVID, people. This was, I got an office now. It's not going to happen anymore, hopefully. Sorry. So what's one up watching? All right. I don't even know why I'm watching it. Because there's nothing on. I got nothing, really, honestly. I am watching the show The Home Edit on Netflix, which is a reality show. It's basically a makeover show with organization with two women who came up with the Home Edit brand and created their empire through social media. And so, hey, more power to you, girls, because I can't do it. I don't know how to do the social media. I get exhausted by it. You think you're posting, it's not enough. You got to post every day. I don't want to overpost. It's too much. I can't deal with it. I hope you never think that I'm overdoing it, please. But I can't believe I watched all of these episodes. Each episode is one regular person and then one celebrity. So they do a regular dude and then Reese Witherspoon or Rachel Zoe or Eva Longoria. And they did Retta from Parks and Rec. It's a joke, okay? Khloe Kardashian's garage was already really clean and organized, and then they just went in and got some clear containers from the Container Store and put it together. And Retta, poor Retta, the decor that they left her with, I wanted to just scream. I was screaming at the TV. My husband was like, "What are you doing?" I mean, Reese Witherspoon, they went in and put all of her clothes from Walk the Line or Legally Blonde and Big Little Lies. They put her wardrobe that she took off of the off of the set, probably. They gave it to her. And then a couple of her Oscar dresses and everything, and they displayed it. It was, first of all, it was a letdown to see Reese Witherspoon's small closet. That was a letdown. You really want to be let down? Watch it just to see Rachel Zoe, who is a fashion person. Her closet is unimpressive for someone who is a stylist. I don't know. And then they jam-packed all of these clothes, color-coordinated, of course, into this closet. I don't even know how she could get shit in and out. I'm telling you right now. I'm jealous. That's what it is. I am jealous of these two women who I did some cool postings on Instagram and probably tagged Reese Witherspoon or Martha Stewart and got discovered. And they wrote a book, and now they're making millions of dollars. And I can't. That's my rant. I can't. I don't know why I'm watching it. Anyway, it's called The Home Edit. It's on Netflix. Maybe check it out. They're putting everything in rainbows and getting paid millions of dollars. I don't get it. I mean, what am I doing? What am I doing wrong? On a lighter note, I rewatched Fast Times at Ridgemont High, which is always so good. It's such a fantastic movie. I never get sick of it. And I love to see the teenage bedrooms and how they were decorated for the era, for the time. It's just so perfect. It's such a great movie. I still laugh. Sean Penn is amazing in that movie. And then we rewatched Breakfast Club, which is a gem. Always. Can't turn that off ever. We started the series Get Shorty, which I think is on Netflix. And I like Ray Romano when he's not on Everybody Loves Raymond. I loved that series that he was in, Men of a Certain Age, was the best. It was on TNT. It was really good. Anyway, Get Shorty. We're like 3 or 4 episodes in. It's good. It's watchable. It's good. Oh, yeah. The sets are good. And then we started Away, which is on Netflix, and I don't know. They spent a lot of money on this. They should have spent a little bit more on the script. They spent a lot of money on sets. The sets are fantastic. I mean, you're in space. You got all this space shit. I don't know. Space shit. I don't know if I could ever do it. Unless, I guess you're just making it up. I don't know. It's a lot. They got a whole garden in the spaceship and the bedroom. I don't know. A lot of buttons. It's a lot of dressing you don't think about, but it's a lot. So, I don't know. We're 3 episodes in. I'm going to finish it. My husband gave up. He's done. So that's what we've been watching. In this episode, I speak to storyboard artist Gabriel Hardman. And I spoke to him in July. So this is a little COVID dated, but just letting you know. I watched the documentary Harold and Lillian, A Love Story, which is on Netflix. I told you to watch it. Fantastic story about storyboard artist Harold Michelson and his career, which is unbelievable. It shows great visually what an actual storyboard artist does. So if you're interested beyond this interview, please check that out too. He was married to a film researcher, Lillian Michelson, whose library we have all used. It's a fantastic documentary. Please watch it. But in the documentary, they interview a storyboard artist working today who is Gabriel Hardman. And I thought, damn, I'd really like to talk to that guy. So I reached out, and he didn't think I was a psycho. And he responded, and now he's on the podcast. I really am trying to venture out of just like not doing art department people. Like, hopefully you've listened to Beth McCarthy Miller, who was a director, Caleb Duffy, a location manager, Jonathan Fisher is an editor, Jeff Rosenberg I have coming up in a couple of weeks, who is an AD and a director, because these other positions are so valuable. And a storyboard artist, I mean, it's defined as a position in the art department, but he really works with the director, as Gabriel will explain. Lucky for me, Gabriel was up for this interview because his resume is seriously impressive. Huge films like Ford versus Ferrari, The Pirates of the Caribbean, Logan, Interstellar. Could you imagine storyboarding Interstellar? How do you even... Dark Knight Rising, Inception, even that. How do you do that? Angels and Demons, Tropic Thunder, the Spider-Man movies, the Austin Power movies, like just a phenomenal resume. These films that he's worked on is incredible. I definitely learned from this interview, more so just specifically about the storyboarding position, and if you are interested in it, he really gives in depth of what you got to get going on. Just amazing amount of imagination and talent to have this position. Amazing skills. So I hope you enjoy.
As well as doing the movie stuff, I work in comics, and so I do loads of podcasts for comics, because that's, you kind of have to promote the books that you do through stuff like that. So, it's doing podcasts, and, doing podcasts with people I don't know or haven't talked to before is not an unfamiliar thing for me.
Oh, okay, good. good. What podcasts have you been on? Just so I can link names up or something.
Just, mostly there's stuff, angled towards comics. I mean, and a bunch of other random things, about a podcast about Bob Dylan, a podcast about, just other stuff that, I like, because there'll be some level of crossover between people hearing me on the comics oriented stuff, or maybe some movie oriented thing. But I think I did a little, a little thing on How Did This Get Made? The movie podcast about bad movies.
Oh yeah,
because the Paul Scheer and the comedians, because I've worked on some bad movies, as well as as other stuff. So
I don't think you've worked on some.
I think they covered one of the things, like I worked on Wild Wild West or something, that they covered on there.
Oh yeah, well, but hey, it was huge when it came out.
It's just amusing. It's not like I'm I'm not at a point in my career where I'm super worried about being, perceived as having worked on some, lousy movie early on when I was starting out.
I know, it's weird. I have obviously things that you're like, and no one ever saw that. You're like, oh, I really liked what I did in that. Nobody saw it. Like, it's such a bummer.
Right.
Such a
right. Well, sure. Yeah.
I guess for me, it's like, oh, I'll use that lamp again because no one saw this other thing.
Yes, right.
So I saw you in the documentary about Harold Michelson. Yeah. And I was like, oh, because I just fell in love with that. I saw it a week or so ago, and I was like, wow. And trying to broaden just getting to know people in other department or other positions in the art department, and making the audience aware that they're just not, I just don't work with like designers and everything. Like, there's so many little spokes that we have, especially in the art department.
Sure.
And I know at one time of the like 10 things I wanted to be when I started figuring out what an art department was a storybook artist. Like, I got on my little cells, and then I was like, I got a script off of a friend. God, what was it? I forget what it was. And tried to like storyboard the whole film or something. And
right.
So, but I'm not, obviously I didn't go with that path, but it was so interesting to me of how a storyboard artist really is on top of it before anybody else is even around. I mean...
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, certainly I'm often one of the first people hired, so it's, and often... Wait, are we starting yet?
Sorry.
Yet?
I just record the whole thing and then I just edit as we start. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, so
sorry.
It's all right. I'm usually one of the first people hired. Often, often there will not even quite be a script at that point. Although that's often the case throughout much of the process for me. They, just as often as not, are starting with just the most basic rudimentary elements and wanting to get things moving. So I'll come on and I'll meet with the director, and and a lot of what I do is kind of invent sequences or jump off of broader ideas for sequences and try to craft something to then show the director, pitch the director, and kind of move the process forward. So very, very often I'm starting with, very little and just trying to, either come up with ideas or get things going or pitch sequences that elements of those will be incorporated as it goes. So, I mean, the way it's not, the movies, pretty much the only movies where it's not like that are the Christopher Nolan movies, because those always had a script at the beginning. The script may change to some extent, but usually not in any really significant way. So their way of working is much different from everybody else's, and much different from most of the films I worked on over my career.
To me, then you would have to have some sort of background or knowledge or passion of like how the camera moves and how the camera works. So did you go to school for film?
I did not. I actually didn't really go to school at all. I couldn't.
You're just a super talent.
Come for money, and I couldn't. I just couldn't afford it, So,
yeah.
And I did I got a scholarship to go to art school, to go to School of Visual Arts in New York, but I only had enough cobbled together scholarship money to go for a semester, and somehow hope to to continue after that, but which I didn't. I didn't, and it was a little bit like. It felt a little like I'd been there and done that before, because I had gone to a high school that had a focus on visual arts. So I had a certain percentage of that, and my mother is a fine artist, and I always came up with a sort of, some kind of art, background. But I, and some of the teachers that I had in the high school were tougher than the ones I did in the at School of Visual Arts, and at School of Visual Arts, the freshman people many of them were coming in just being, not having a lot of experience with that stuff, and were, and so it felt kind of like I'd already done this and didn't feel like it was worth going on. And at the same time, I had always, I had been a fan of comics when I was younger. I mean, I'm still a fan of comics, but I mean, I'd ended up trying to get into drawing comics as a, in my mind, that was a way to make money as a, with art. And so I did end up getting into drawing some Marvel comics when I was younger. When I was 18, I did a book for them. And for a couple of years, I made a living off of drawing comics until comics are actually kind of very volatile industry, and the bottom will fall out of it every couple of years. And when that happened, I had just moved out to Los Angeles and kind of just told everybody that I was going to be a storyboard artist, despite making no real effort at this and having no plan.
You had a vision board. You obviously had a vision board, and you drew a vision board, probably.
Absolutely. I had experience with, this is all about storytelling, right? It's all about visual storytelling. So comics are visual storytelling, and the storytelling and the visual are equally important, right? It's not about, writing something that is then kind of slavishly, recreated visually. It's all storytelling, visual storytelling. So I'm bringing those skills to try to be a storyboard artist, but also just, I was, a comic book fan, but I'm really a film fan, right? I'm Hitchcock's my favorite director. I'm filmmaking was, just as an amateur, I read everything,
right.
I read film history and film books. I saw a million movies. And so all this stuff was, which I didn't really do in some sort of calculated way. It turned out to be very, very important when I got, my first jobs doing storyboards, because I could kind of bullshit my way through it, right. and more or less know what people were talking about, even though I didn't study any of this, properly.
And so you move, I'm kind of the same thing. I went to school for interior design, but I didn't go to school for set decorating, but I was a huge film dork and knew that guy who was in that film, who was, the guy's best friend, and I could name it. I was that kind of person. So I do feel like everything I did lended up to me getting to where I am, even though I didn't study for exactly this. And obviously, especially with, being a fine artist and having that talent is something that first of all, you don't want to waste. And secondly, once you specify what you really want to do, you just explode. Your whole passion just goes into it. You just explode into it. So moving out and telling everybody you're going to be a storyboard artist, I believe you. I'd be that guy's going to be a storyboard artist.
Well, the way I ended up getting the way I ended up getting into it was really literally just I went to a book. I was a big fan of Twin Peaks. This is in the 90s.
Yeah.
I went to a book signing for Mark Frost, who's one of the co-creators of Twin Peaks, and standing in line to get my book signed, I'm talking, the guy next to me is talking to me and hey, what do you do? And I'm well, comic book artist, but I want to do storyboards. And he's like, oh yeah, well, I know this guy, this agent, storyboard agent, here, I'll give you his number. And so literally the next day I just called up that agent and said, hey, I met so-and-so. He recommended I call you. And the guy was like, okay, well, come up with do you have some samples to show? And I was like, absolutely. And made an appointment to bring him to him the next day. I did not have any samples. So I stayed up that night and just drew a sequence. I actually between art school, my one semester of art school, and starting to draw comics, I was a security guard at the Guggenheim for like 9 months, the Guggenheim Museum, right? Mm-hmm. I was like literally like an 18-year-old kid. I should not have had this job. But I had always imagined, spending hours and hours just standing around. I'd always kind of pictured a big action sequence in the rotunda in the Guggenheim, And so I was like, well, I'll just, I just basically just boarded out my imagined action sequence from, as if it were, boards for a film. I took that to the agent. He was like, oh yeah, these are pretty good. I could get you work off of this. He got me some commercials. And relatively quickly that led to working on Austin Powers, on the first Austin Powers movie, which was a tiny, tiny movie. It was a $16 million movie that was non-union when it started. And, in pre-production, it was non-union. And so I could work on it at that point.
Right.
And it turned out to be a really good experience, and a really valuable experience. I mean, the movie also went union when it started shooting, so that the producer was able to, I was able to get the producer to call. It was not the Art Directors Guild then; we were a separate thing as illustrators guild, and he reported my hours, and then I was in the union. Like I got in the union very quickly, and sort of, it was just all things that lined up really well for me. So
I gotta go back because really I think it's super important that you networked to, like, I always say, like, networking, going to events or like going to that book signing or whatever, you never know who you're going to meet because you never know who they know.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh,
it's not exactly that person. I always say that it's like, oh, hey, my friend does so-and-so. You guys should meet up. And especially I think when we were, because I came out in 99, when we were young, and you get this like group of people that you hang out with, and you're all kind of like, everybody wants to be something different in Hollywood mostly. That then you're like, hey, my friend's an agent, or hey, so you have all these people that you might know that are in different sections that you aren't in. And I mean, that's just incredible that the guy was just, and to be honest, I never knew that storyboarders had agents, so I'm blown away.
Well, here's the thing, they don't need them.
Yeah, I was going to say, did you have to give that guy money?
There are a couple of storyboard agencies, and there probably still are. I'm honestly not sure. I only really kept the agent for like the first year until it was kind of clear that I was getting the jobs based on, word of mouth from other people I had worked with.
Yeah.
And then, I'd never signed a contract with him. And then when it came time to, I was kind of like, I'll just see how it goes on my own. And that was 1997 or something. So I haven't had an agent since then and haven't needed one. But it was the way that it's valuable is basically getting work on commercials, because that's just that's a lot more like scattershot than working on films. But I don't like to work on commercials, and I don't.
Neither do I.
Possible. So the only time I work on commercials is if it's a feature director that I know who needs them. But generally I avoid that if at all possible. So that part of it isn't an issue for me, and I really just get jobs based on recommendations from people going, hey,
That's an incredible story, backed up by you had the talent to, make up a whole portfolio in one night and get that agent or get hired on even a small movie. Like, that's incredible.
Although I will say that the very first job I did was was a Honda commercial. It was on New Year's Eve. No, it was on Christmas Eve. It was like, and it was this British director he was just a commercial director. And it was the worst experience of my life. Like, I literally, this guy was so miserable, and he was so just abusive towards me and insulting that I came out of that job and literally just said, to the agent, I'm not cut out for this. I'm not doing this. Right. And that was going to be it for me. Cause he literally kept me until like midnight on Christmas Eve, and then said my work, my work was garbage, and he just endlessly insulted me. And then after that, like, whoever they got to replace me on that job called up the agent and was like, the boards that guy did were actually really good. I don't know what this director's talking about. So then the agent called me back and was like, why don't you just try another one? Maybe this wasn't great. And then I did another one and it was fine. And I've never had any kind of experience like that again. Yeah. And even when I've worked for a lot of particularly difficult feature directors, and that's kind of like my specialty. Like I deal with that pretty well. So this guy was just a sort of bitter anomaly, and it was a really, really bad first experience. And if I didn't just give it another shot, I would have just left and never tried it.
Good for you. What a dick. That was your test. That was your test to see if you were cutting out for this. I'm wondering, when you have such interaction with a director, then where in the process or at all does working with a production designer come in?
It's a weird situation, and it's often very fraught because also with the director of photography, but much more so with the production designer, because because I report to the director. Right. The director's kind of my boss 99% of the time.
Right.
But obviously, I'm a member of the art department, and I've had several circumstances where that just becomes, either a lot of cool production designers I've worked with who are just, they're not threatened by that situation. Like, Francois Dewey is a friend of mine. He's designed Ford Ferrari and Logan and everything, and we've known each other for 20 years. But and working on the movies with Jim Mangold is all very much just everybody's there to do their job, and there's there's actually very little of that kind of politicking and jealousy that goes on, and which is very refreshing. I've been in other situations where the production designer can get extremely threatened by the fact that I'm reporting to the director and make my life a little bit difficult. But to me, I'm just there to do the job. I just want to, I want to interface with the art department as much as humanly possible, because that's where I can get the information and do the most, I do the most accurate boards. I want to talk to visual effects. I want to talk to, to anybody that is going to give me information that will help me do the, make the most useful boards possible. So it's, sometimes that can get a little weird, but, and there are situations where I've been inexplicably banned from the art department and stuff, but, just one experience like that.
Do you think it's because you're creating something that then they have to, achieve, and and they didn't have input on it, in a sense?
I think that's their fear, but I don't think that's what the real situation is, especially since I'm in no way even trying to exert any design influence on the movie. I really am about storytelling, and I'm about visual storytelling and how to make sequences work, how to tell the story in pictures, but not about design, not about trying to influence that kind of stuff. And really the position of a storyboard artist is really odd in the hierarchy of things, just because I'm reporting to the director, but I'm not but a lot, in a lot of ways, storyboard artists are not considered, it's not a super respected position often in the scheme of things. So, but it is what it is. You're there to do your job. You're there to, you're there to tell the story. The director's the one you deal with for the most part. And if everything's working, you're dealing with everybody. And
right. Well, yeah, you are.
And you get all the information you can from everybody.
Because, and I'm going to ask you about research in a minute, but just so I have like a visual point, like say in the film Inception, so I would think maybe that whole film was storyboarded because of every single sequence seems like it should have been or something. So a scene like, was the beginning scene, like the bathtub scene, was that storyboarded?
A vast majority of the movie was.
Yeah.
I mean, I know the very opening sequence was. I know that that most of the big sequences throughout it were, though I ended up spending the majority of my time on the ending multi-level dream stuff,
the wake up scene
for the last big chunk of the movie.
Yeah, that big wake up scene.
All of that was so interconnected, and
well, yeah, I mean, I even just rewatched it again, and I had to count like physically on my hand, like, wait, they're in this dream, they're in that, and then they went deep, and then it's 3, and then okay, now this is 4, and then they're in her. I think we're in 5 levels right now. Like I've seen the movie a couple times, and I still had to physically like count it out.
Yeah, honestly, I get a little panicky when I start
sitting
there with that stuff, It's, and that was my first movie with Chris Nolan, and it was, and he had never seriously used a storyboard artist before.
Interesting.
He's gotten where he is because of a certain discipline and control over everything, and so
no chairs.
He felt that. Yes. Look, I had a chair. I don't.
Okay, good. Okay, I just read that like a week ago or something. Like he doesn't like chairs. On
I think that's actually one of the. I've spent basically no time on. I mean, there are other movies where I've spent the entire shoot on set, but on his movies, I really haven't. I didn't at all because there's just no reason to. Everything is so kind of cut and dried with him. But But that whole thing about the chairs is a little nonsense. I mean, I think that he doesn't have, I think they don't have chairs at Video Village or whatever, but like, does everybody sit around in a chair on set? I mean, most people don't. It's just a hierarchical thing where a couple of important people get chairs. So when everybody freaks out about it, I think they're maybe not super aware of how sets actually work. So, whatever. Yeah. But still, I'm
wondering though. So with the scene with that wake up.
Lost in the question.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So I'm trying to think of it too, because then I started thinking about that wake up scene. The wake up scene. So if you're storyboarding that, and the designer, I mean, there has to be some elements of even furniture wise that need to be there to achieve the storyboard vision that the director wants. So it does trickle down or trickle over or whatever into many other departments.
To some extent, if I'm not getting anything, or there isn't anything from, the art department yet, if there aren't illustrations, if they haven't done much research yet on things like that, in a way, I'll try to keep things a little bit vague. I mean, I actually just don't really want to, I don't want to make those decisions. I don't want to step on that. I want to just get the idea of the story across, and ultimately it's like, I feel like for the most part, I do, pretty, I put a lot into the drawing, but you don't have to. I don't think that that's necessarily the important part about storyboards. The important part about storyboards is a communication, and it's basically like it's a sort of visual script, but it's also kind of just a document to get to kind of distribute these ideas to the rest of the crew. So it's not really like I'm it's always a work in progress. It's always I mean, to the degree that like, I think that, I mean, this is the case with everybody on a film. I mean, to some extent, your work can be thrown out, of course, and everybody's is. But as a storyboard artist, you spend weeks doing, an enormous amount of work on something that just in an instant can be thrown out, and then you just do it again and again and again. It's never you can never hold on to things. You can never. You can never be precious about something. So to an extent, it is about just communicating the ideas less than it's about, making pretty pictures or trying to somehow influence those other aspects of the film,
but
the design.
I think too, one of the things that I'm sure when you present a sequence and you're thinking too about lighting, that's influential to the director and or the DP of how you've lit your storyboard and the emotion that you're giving to those drawings. It's something that if a director could probably completely fall in love in and then like want. So it is very critical, the emotion that you're giving to a lot of the boards, I'm assuming.
Yeah, and I think that part of it is really important to me too. The emotion and the atmosphere of it, and trying to create boards that are expressive rather than just accurate. Mm-hmm. Because in the past it was very much about just making sure that the boards were shootable, which, due to the way that things have changed technically, is somewhat less important. There, you can shoot almost anything now, but but also
scary, isn't it?
Previs exists. They're very specific. You can make a little model and it can be exact what the set's going to be, and you can have a little CG character in there that represents where the actor is going to in theory stand in space. But it's not expressive. It's dead. It's, right. It's not, there's not the emotion there. There's not the feeling in the atmosphere. And so I feel like the best thing that I can bring to stuff like this is telling the story and also conveying that kind of emotion and expressive quality to it that can get something across that you can't get just from, something like previs, which is great about showing the motion and about describing the lenses and a lot of other stuff. I have nothing against previs, and I've spent an enormous amount of time working with previs artists. But I think that for doing boards, it is very much about the expressiveness of the
yes.
Something underneath just those technical things.
So when you get a script, what would your process be? Or like you were saying, you only get full scripts on maybe some of the movies. Is it more of a description of one scene, or they're handing you over like one scene to storyboard? Like, what is your process even with that?
Ideally I'll get, it's not like I'm cut out of the loop of getting the scripts. Ideally I'll have read the whole script, whatever, state it's in. But when it has a lot to do with talking about the director, about what the tone that they're looking for is. But it also is hopefully something where I can just connect to that tone and then, and get that out of the script to an extent, or get that out of whatever, mood type research and photos and stuff that the director is coming with. And I also think about, if it's a director who's made other films, who has a body of work, I'll try to look at those films and get a sense of where they're coming from generally, storytelling wise. Like usually to some extent, I'm trying to kind of guess at their sensibilities, and get something that reflects their sensibilities while I'm still contributing something to it. So, and obviously it's their film. They're going to go make the film and it's going to be what it's going to be. But like, there's no point in trying to, there's no point in not doing that. I mean, I want to, I had seen Nolan's films before. I mean, I'd seen Jim Mangold's films, and there are some people that I don't like, sensibility wise, I have almost nothing in common with Sam Raimi, but I worked with him very, very closely. And I just tried to put myself, in,
but I think that's smart. I think you're almost changing. I mean, you have to change gears, and we all do in a sense of now I'm not going to bring in all black furniture if I know that they, the director likes light things or something like that, like something simple like that. Like, it's smart to adjust to, well, this guy's style is more of like a a lot of push-ins, or like, quick cuts or whatever. So I think that's important. Definitely. Yeah. And probably
I also do have really strong, sensibilities and really and strong ideas about storytelling and what, what's good and bad. And I'll fight for those and I'll make my opinion known. So it's not
making
like
it your own.
It's a two-way street, Yeah.
Do you ever storyboard with the actors in mind? Like, if you knew someone who was going to be cast, does that influence at all?
Yeah. I mean, and it does. It depends on, the degree. Obviously, if I know exactly who it's going to be, I'll draw up some sort of likeness, and I'll try to get the sense of that. I mean, when I worked on, I worked on Tropic Thunder with Ben Stiller.
I just rewatched that.
And that was a really good experience for me, actually. But Ben was very focused on getting likenesses for people, and so that could be a little bit of a stumbling block at times. But but then there's also things where, like, say I'm working on onboarding something that stars Harrison Ford. Well, I've seen a lot of Harrison Ford movies, and I have internalized Harrison Ford and how he, tends to, like the way he moves and the kind of stuff he does, and that stuff's gonna get in there. It's gonna get on the boards.
Yeah. I rewatched Tropical Thunder thinking, like, what could he have storyboarded in that? But there are a couple sequences of, like, the bombs going off or the ending scene at the bridge. I'm assuming that
all that was boarded. And I wasn't the only board artist on there. There were a couple others. But,
Did you, in any way, have to storyboard that dance that Tom Cruise does at the end?
I did not, no. And I think all of that kind of developed when they were shooting it. So, it wasn't really conceived as that initially. It was conceived a little bit more of a straight, scene.
Oh
but
I think it's his best role. I think it's Tom Cruise's best role, to be honest. I'm not a huge Cruise fan, but like when it's hysterical. I think that whole movie is hysterical. I was kind of excited to watch it again. But it's good. It holds up. It's good. I mean, Danny McBride's in it. I had forgotten that Danny McBride's in it, and Nick Nolte. Right. I was like, oh my god. But I
remember actually seeing Nick Nolte. This is dumb Hollywood stuff, but I when in the offices, I remember I was walking down the hall and I was like, I wonder who that super old guy Ben Stiller's talking to is.
He doesn't hold up well in person,
who that
unfortunately.
Amazingly craggy guy is that Ben Stiller's talking to.
Yeah.
As I got, it's Nick Nolte. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's great though. He's amazing.
Oof. It's rough. It's rough. I could, God bless him. But I forget what I was going to ask next. It was something about Tropic Thunder. No, I forget. Is it a different gear for you to storyboard a comedy versus an action or a drama?
Yeah, definitely. And I started out doing Austin Powers, and I started out, doing a lot of comedies in my career.
Flubber. And, what was the other one?
The
other, Mr. Magoo.
Oh my God, yeah, that was terrible. But
The other Austin Powers.
And it was also a somewhat terrible experience. It was an interesting experience. The director was a Hong Kong action director, and he did a lot of he had been a stunt guy, and he would frequently do like high kicks right in your face, like 2 inches from your face, and like stuff like that. Not super comfortable with that.
Yeah.
But that was a weird one because it was not the script wasn't funny. He wasn't funny, and it was awkward. But like it is a different skill set, sort of, for thinking about like the visuals of comedy, and like I think that, I mean, it's more about showing stuff than giving the impression of stuff. I mean, action is more about getting the idea across in sort of minimal terms or something, and comedy is more about showing you things. You have to actually see the gag in order to understand it and appreciate it. And I mean, I worked early multiple times with Mike Myers, and while those movies aren't the most visual movies in the world, Mike was always very, very, he's one of those kind of comedy, analyzing comedy type of guys. He thinks a lot about it, and Mike Myers himself is very analytical, and he's not, despite doing very broad stuff, he thinks a lot about the comedy in a kind of schematic way, which was very enlightening for me and interesting, and helped me kind of have a point of view on this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you did all 3 of the Austin Powers. It must have been a journey of growth, not just for the character, but just your relationship with knowing what he wanted or what you wanted the scenes to be.
And also Jay Roach, the director,
did all 3.
That was the first one. Was Jay Roach's first movie. The first Austin Powers was the first feature he directed. So it was kind of, it was very much a, kind of a learning experience for everybody. And, which was a good way for me to start as well, and I spent a lot of time, but also, since it was such a small movie, and Mike Myers' career at that point was not, it had, like, he did, like, the second Wayne's World had disappointed, and he did, Sorry, I Married an Axe Murderer, if that's what it's called, which was a good movie, but not successful.
No.
And so, like, he was trying to, like, come back. It was a little movie. He spent a lot of time there. I spent a lot of time, we would go over to his house and, and sit around and like he has an odd way of approaching things where, like, he would put on,
is this Mike or Jay?
This is Mike Myers.
Mike, okay.
Mike Myers would put on, Francois Truffaut's The 400 Blows, and we would sit there and watch it, and he would, like, pause it and go, could we have a shot like this? And I'm just going, like, what does this have to do with the Austin Powers again? But, like, but he can come at things in a very oblique way that's also, kind of more interesting than less, straightforward or something.
Have you always worked in the same medium throughout your career, or do you switch up?
I mean, at the beginning, everything was still analog. I mean, it was drawing on paper and distributing making photocopies and distributing those. I mean, I did at different times I would work in pencil or with markers, and over the course, but in the last, whatever it is, 15 years or so, I've really only worked digitally, and it's just, as much because that's how like the distribution model of it works. I mean, you basically, you have to give people a PDF, and you're not going to sit there scanning the pages, so, and it also just gives you a lot more flexibility to work digitally. I mean, for the comics and graphic novels that I do, I draw those on paper. I draw those traditionally, and I'm very kind of messy and expressive with, the ink, and I like the tactile quality of that. But that's each page is the final product, and that just gets scanned, and that's what goes in the book. So this, and doing boards is way more erratic than that. There's things get dropped and changed and whatever at a moment's notice. So
right.
It's not actually, there's not like a practical way to do it when it's not digital. That said, Christopher Nolan has this idea that that like everything has to be some sort of lo-fi analog thing. And so when I started on Inception, he was like, well, I want you to draw all of these in pencil on paper.
Jesus.
And which is not in any way the norm at the time.
Right.
And so I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, of course, and I gather that there's some idea that, if you do that, you have to commit to the lines that you make because you're going to have to erase it or something. I don't know. But but when I came back to...
it's a discipline.
So like I did that, so I did Inception, and I came back to do the third Batman movie. And in the first meeting with him, I was like, if I drew these digitally, it would go faster. And he just like stared at me and said, "You're fooling yourself."
Oh.
Okay, fine.
That's so
but
scary.
that's kind of what it's like working with Christopher Nolan. So the reality is it does go faster if you draw it digitally. But for whatever reason, that's what he wanted. That's what I did. That was fine.
I almost did some reshoots of. Oh my God! Now I lost it. It's like a vampire movie coming out with Jared Leto, and but scheduling wise, I couldn't do it. And yes, and I started to even like prep, like even for a couple days, and they showed me this action sequence that they had to put into the movie, and I mean, it was done. Every piece of dressing was like in this computer generated, 4-minute sequence that they, sent out to us. And I was like, fuck it, man, just render it and be done. Like,
right.
Why are we just like, I don't know. Ugh, all right. And unfortunately I didn't get to do it, but I was so impressed. I didn't realize that. I thought there were some things that were still wireframed and everything, but I was like, oh, this is like completely done out. This is crazy. Am I supposed to get that sofa?
Yeah. I don't personally have anything against previs, and I've spent a lot of time working with previs, but at the same time, and obviously my job is about like planning things and stuff.
Right.
But personally, I don't necessarily think that's the best way to do any of this. Like, yeah. I think that I think there's a lot of value in being able to, roll with stuff and invent things along the way and be open to things. And I'm not, the times that I've directed shorts and different stuff, I'm not about, meticulously planning everything until it has no life anymore, And I actually don't know that that's a great thing. I don't think that's a great thing for films. I think that the ability to plan things to the degree that they are, often it's not really used very well. A lot of it's a kind of a waste, especially if things aren't figured out in advance anyway. But it's not, I think that kind of thing can lead to sort of detachment that that I don't particularly like. I think that that movies, tend to be feel a little hermetically sealed, and particularly the action sequences are not necessarily great. They lose a kind of spontaneity to them and feeling to them when they're planned to death.
No, I agree. It's overthought, and then it gets lost.
Yeah.
You've been able to do other projects. How do you like stepping out of your storyboarder position?
I mean, I'm open to any new challenges and stuff. And I've always wanted to make films. I've always wanted to direct stuff. I don't necessarily want to make giant films. I'm interested in, drama and storytelling and stuff that, that's a little more human scale for the most part. And even though I do comics, and some of those are superhero comics and stuff that I've done freelance, a lot of the stuff that the things that I do, the comics that my wife and I write some stuff together that I also draw, and those are a lot more character oriented and a lot more grounded, and that's the kind of stuff that my personal sensibility is more oriented.
I mean, it seems like a natural step almost to become a director.
I would think so. Yeah, it's just not as easy.
It's not as easy. But, I'm not saying it's easy. I'm saying it seems like that would be like, oh, I know everything. You're figuring everything out before everyone else gets there. So it's kind of like being you're directing in a sense. You're directing it visually.
Yeah, I mean, you're not, but it's. I mean, I always feel uncomfortable with taking any credit like that because there's so many components to directing that are not, that aren't about, just pre-planning, but.
Well, there's so many opportunities too. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, go.
I was just there's a lot of opportunities that come up too, like once they see a new location, and then things change, and then which I'm sure affects the storyboard sometimes too. But there's opportunities of like, oh, look at this little room over here that they can come out of, or things that just come up that are pleasant surprises and help visually. And sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you're like, oh shit, there's no doors. He was supposed to come through a door, and we're at this location. Yeah. You know what I mean? Or so.
Well, yeah, and often, I mean, and there's a lot. Yeah, there are a lot of films where I've been, I've been on certainly, into shooting or on location with them or whatever. Where like, oh, something's coming. On Logan there was a sequence in a casino, and it's like they're off doing something else, but and it's like, oh, just I would just go down to the location and try to figure stuff out and board it based on that, see if there are any opportunities in that in the location to do something interesting with it. I mean, I guess luckily the security is pretty lax for some reason at the casino and in New Orleans, where I just went and like laid on the floor and took photographs of everything, and nobody seemed to care.
That's insane. That's insane. Because I was a casino dealer, and they would flag down anybody ever taking pictures. Like you weren't even allowed to take pictures.
Yeah,
that's
crazy. Funny. I don't know. Oh, maybe, I guess at Harrah's in New Orleans.
I was in Harrah's Atlantic City. That is really funny. I started to watch Logan, and I didn't get to finish it, but I've seen it before. I love that film. I think as a standalone film, it's really good.
Yeah, I liked it a lot. I'm not, I have worked on a couple of... I, over the years, worked on a couple of X-Men movies. I was not enthusiastic about the idea of doing another one. But after talking to Jim Mangold about it, and knowing that he was trying to make a real movie, not some superhero sequel, was really important. And that I think that the intention the whole way had been to make something that that's a movie, not a sequel, not a, I think it is just a movie that works on its own. And that's so much more what I'm interested in doing than something that is, I've not worked on any of the proper Marvel movies. And that's partly by design. It's not really, I don't know that those aren't for me in a lot of ways. And I think that, I would much rather, if at all possible, work on something that at least is trying to be a film that stands on its own.
Well, I have to say, like, even like Ford versus Ferrari or Interstellar, I mean, you definitely have films that are standalone, like, amazing films. I mean, your resume is pretty incredible, man.
Yeah.
Do you have...
Yeah, I mean, it's mainly just, worked out that way.
Well, when you do a film like Interstellar versus like Ford versus Ferrari, is there more freedom in one versus the other because like something like Interstellar's space, or is that then are you tied to like space stuff? Like, I don't know. Is it hard?
Well, I mean, I think in a way that with Interstellar, it's, it was very, I mean, it's still, even though a lot of the stuff at the end of Interstellar was not as figured out as, I mean, Nolan writes very sparsely. So, sparsely to the point of absurdity sometimes, where, the information you're actually getting in the script is so limited. It's like, you're relying on other things other references if they're there to figure out even what it is you're working with. But so when you get to these incredibly abstract things towards the end of it, those were a little bit more open, and that was a lot about talking to visual effects, talking to Paul Franklin, and trying to figure out like how to approach these things. So like in some ways that's more open, but there's nothing ever feels particularly open about a Christopher Nolan movie. And it's all very kind of, he creates a very insular world. So, on Ford versus Ferrari, there was more of a script. The script changes to a degree. With Jim Mangold, it is the process is a lot more open. He, he revises things a lot more and comes up with ideas, and we work through ideas. And some, they don't always go anyplace. Logan had very different, had a couple of very different iterations, even while I was on the show. It wasn't like the thing that it ended up being was exactly what we started for in the first place. And I do like working with Jim in that it's, well, I mean, I like working with just because I like the guy. We get along, and we both of us are very much into old movies and film history and stuff like that, and so kind of have a common language for a lot of that stuff. But I do like in some ways it's more open to work with him on these projects just because there are the ideas are less set. You're throwing out different stuff. He's revising things. The process is just a lot more organic. Right. So it's and I like that. I like the well, yeah, because you have free. But you want to create. Both. I'm sorry.
You want to create too. You know what I mean? Like it sounds. Yes, you don't want to be so controlled.
Yeah, totally. But it's also just both of them are good though. Both processes are good. Like if like having a script and knowing exactly the thing that you're doing is such a rarity that's a really good thing too. I mean, they're all just different processes, and I think that all of it's valid.
It is a weird thing how it all seems to get done, and we do all have different processes. Like, I'm sure the way, even when you get a script, like, do you read the whole thing through and then start to research, or do you research as you go? Like, everyone has a different way of doing it all. I mean, but
I mean, I definitely want to read the whole script. I definitely want to know what this story is we're telling. I mean, I don't want to work. I mean, in some ideal world, I don't want to work on a movie where I don't know what the story is we're telling, and whether it's something that I feel like I can contribute something to. So, I mean, I think that, and as far as just my process of doing research, I mean, I particularly, I mean, several of these things for Ferrari and, something that I'm sporadically working on now throughout the pandemic, but can't talk about are, have, historical elements to them. So it's not like you can't, it's something that you can dive into and have a real context for the world that you're, that you're working in. Whereas something else that's very fantasy oriented or something doesn't until somebody nails all that stuff down. Right. Personally, I like working in something where I have a really good sense of what the world is, where we're telling the story, and the tone that we're trying to aim for.
Yeah, I can imagine just reading Interstellar and being like, where do I begin? I don't know. Yeah. I really liked that movie, and I think I saw a Q&A with Christopher Nolan on that, but I liked that movie, but damn, it's another sort of like Inception, sort of like confusing and or like what just happened, but yeah, I don't know. That's just me.
Well, I mean, I think that Inception is a more successful movie, but just creatively. But like as far as how to approach something like that, I believe that like the first thing I did on that was something pretty grounded. It was, early on in the film with, driving through cornfields and stuff like that. So, I mean, but the first thing that I did on Inception, which was the first thing I did with Chris at all, was the, fight in the elevator that's rotating and, and he's like, it's not the elevator that's rotating. It's the entire world that's rotating. It's like, okay, fine.
Yeah.
But it was, so that was unbelievably complex. That just, every bit of that was complex. But at that point, it was also kind of a good challenge. I was at a point where I was very down on doing storyboards. That was, 2009, I think. I had already been, I'd been working for, like 12 years or something like that. I had, like the last couple of big movies I'd worked on were not good experiences. I worked on Spider-Man 3 with Sam Raimi for like 2 years, and it was a really difficult experience, which was pretty clear that it was not going to be a good movie at every point along the way. So but it was also the most intense experience I've ever had working on a movie. Wow. So working on with Chris on Inception was good because it was very different from everything else, and it was a big, interesting challenge that actually had a script. So, so having a script in that instance, is good.
When you're hired and you start, are you usually on the whole run of the filming?
Not necessarily. It really just depends. I mean, for the Nolan movies, I was not on the whole time. I would, maybe would come back and do some small bits of reshoots or something, but almost always was very uniform, and I'd be on for like 4 months before they started shooting, and the other things where, I mean, I was on through quite a lot of Logan's shooting. I was on Spider-Man 3, I had already been on the movie for over a year, and I was not the only storyboard artist on that. There were multiple storyboard artists on that. And then I was on through the entirety of shooting, going to New York. I was on set almost every day trying to talk to Sam because I was sort of in charge of the certain previs sequences as well. Mm-hmm. So, so I would have to go there, talk to Sam about that, try to get him to approve shots. It was like a middle management job or something. So, which was not great. And it was less about drawing storyboards than it was just directing. Well, but it was directing the previs just in a way that was sort of sublimated to Sam. So I would work with the previs artists. We would, we'd create shots, and then I'd take them to Sam to try to get them approved. But the process of making that movie was so chaotic, and there was no there was no ending. There was no idea what the big ending would be exactly most of the time. And Sam Raimi was not particular. And then at a certain point, I came on the movie later than a lot of the other people who had worked on the previous Spider-Man movies with him. And not a lot of work had gotten accomplished yet, even though they'd been on it for many, many months. And I like to get things done, and I like to be kind of practical and move forward on things.
Yeah.
And so, I was assigned a sequence, and which meant I was boarding it, but I also would then work with the previs people to do the full previs for it, and previs animatic for it, and so I just did that. I worked on this thing. I showed it to Sam. I worked with the previous people to get it done, and we worked really hard. And I had a little team of people, a few of whom I'd worked with previously on other films, and we finished this sequence, and everybody was like, "Oh my God, they actually did something! Like something got accomplished, something got finished." It's like the only sequence that got finished, right? And so then I was like, my reward was getting assigned the full battle thing, the big ending of it, which no one ever figured out, no one wanted to figure out, and I spent most of the rest of the movie struggling to get Sam to commit to something with that, and basically it never worked out. There was nothing to do with it, and it became a quite the frustrating experience. So you can have all of these things, you can have all these tools, and you can have all of this pre-planning, but really, if there isn't a certain just like commitment to the script, to the thing that we're doing, to the, it doesn't really amount to anything. It doesn't matter how much you pre-plan something, if you don't end up doing it,
No. That makes sense. See, now that makes a lot of sense. Do you ever get to, like, if you're on something for that long, do you get to work on 2 projects or 3 projects or whatever at the same time? Can you overlap?
Not on that one, because every day I was at Sony. There were days where I was at Sony for 19 hours and stuff like that, because I'd be there all day while they were shooting. They would wrap, and then I'd go back to editorial with Sam, and work with all them. And editorial was very integrated into this whole process as well. But not on that. Although at the very end of it, that was 2006 or 7, and at the very end of it, I was still on after wrap. Actually, come to think of it, on that one, I was on for a couple of months after wrap for just to be there in case, because Sam would never shoot anything if he didn't have it represented in some way, as a board, as a previs, anything, right? So he needed things to be like preconceived in some way. So I would just sit there all day. He'd have like one shot that he needed boarded that day. I would do that. I'd have nothing else to do all day. So I just started drawing a graphic novel while I was there, and everybody knew I was doing it. And it wasn't like a secret, because I just had nothing else to do. So, but they needed me anyway. Right. So that's actually kind of how I came back to doing comics, and how and for the last, ever since then, I've sort of had a parallel career doing films, but not always, like doing films about half of the time and doing comics, graphic novel work the other half of the time.
That's amazing.
Because the comics are more of that's sort of a more direct creative outlet for me. I'm writing, I'm drawing, I'm telling the whole story. It's a story I want to tell. These are all these other. I do my absolute best on every project on the films, but I wouldn't choose to tell most of these stories. They're the director and the writer and everybody. That's their passion. So I'm trying to do my best within that framework. But doing comics is about being able to tell stories that I'm passionate about.
That's incredible that you have that other outlet and have a passion for it. That's amazing.
Well, it's all down to storytelling, right? So, comics are just another form of visual storytelling, and it's a more sort of pared down thing compared to a movie. You can only there's a page, and you can only have that many panels on a page, but it's but there's a kind of poetic spare quality to telling the story that way, and that really appeals to me as well.
You've also been credited as illustrator. I mean, I know the difference, kind of, but do you? It seems like you enjoy being a storybook artist more than an illustrator. But can you tell me a little bit like where that line is?
I mean, well, on films, the illustrations are more oriented towards the art department for the most part, about showing sets, about conceiving the visuals from the point of view of the production designer, and very much oriented towards design. And I think that that's something that, while I really admire it and it's very integral to everything, my skill set is not really so much about design in that way. And I'm much more about sequentially telling a story, about how to tell a story in a series of shots. And that's what interests me the most.
Right.
And doing design oriented stuff just isn't particularly interesting to me. So, I mean, I've certainly done it, but I don't think that that's where I don't think that's the best use of me. So, I mean, I think that, which is not to say there isn't an enormous amount of storytelling in illustration, but it's also
the illustrations are more
I do like the fast and looseness of words.
I see. Wow. I've only worked on 2 films or 3. And they're like little tiny ones. We're not storyboarding anything. I have worked a couple times on TV shows where they're like an action sequence and like, we should storyboard this. And it's like, ooh, that's so exciting. They're getting a storyboard artist here. Yeah. But I could see how like illustrating is sort of more of like setting the overall scene, and whereas the storyboard is more of the action of the dialogue. Right? Is that right?
It's more of the way that the story is told visually throughout the movie. I mean, it's it's more the equivalent of, if you have if there's a set there on stage, you could stand back at one corner and you can look at the whole thing, and you can, and see exactly, all the elements of it, how it's dressed, all that sort of stuff. But, doing the boards is more like walking in there with the, and taking out a camera and showing the way things happen within that set, So, I mean, it's like the priorities of it are different. The priorities of an illustration are about explaining how everything is, what the opportunities of something are, how it, it could look overall, but that's not what you're going to see in a movie. You see the way that it's told through the camera, and so my focus is always about how how are we going to show off this set? I don't care how you show off the set. I don't really care. I only care how much you see of the set.
I like to keep it wide.
Story, because that's a component of telling a story.
I like to keep it wide. That's what I like to say. Keep it wide. Keep it one.
That's whatever, but. That's the thing. That's why I have to be an unpopular opinion for the people in the art department, right? Because I'm not concerned about that. I only am interested in how if we need to be wide in order to tell this story, in order to get this emotion across, in order to in order to see something that's absolutely integral to the story, then we should be wide. If we're not, if it's about a specific piece of business, a look on an actor's face, a movement through a room or something like that. Absolutely. You need to be telling a story from, that in the way that's most visually effective to get that across, regardless of whether or not we can see the set.
Absolutely. I get it. Have you ever walked onto a set and then thought, oh, I could rethink this now that I'm in it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yes, absolutely. Yeah. And even in the most, in its, like when it's, just the bare bones of a set, you can get some sense, whenever I'm working on a show and things are, and they're building something, or I'll go down to the stage and look at it, or if I'm on it, or just on a tech scout, I mean, things change all the time. You go on a scout and there's, just different opportunities for the way to show something visually. I'm not it's absurd to try to like, force through an idea that isn't, that you can't shoot. That would be dumb. You should like integrate the elements that you have. And it's always about taking the, it gets into a vague area where it's more like writing than boarding, but in creating action sequences and stuff, often you're inventing a lot of the business and the action and stuff. And the way, and the answer to everything is always to use what's already there. If don't make up some extra component, some extra thing, an extra room, an extra, prop or whatever. You use what's already there, and that's going to inform the better way to tell the story.
I like that because I don't like to get extra shit. Are you watching anything now well, when you watch things, do you try to guess like what sequences were storyboarded?
No, because it doesn't matter. Like it doesn't even matter. Like it's not. It's if anything, it's the boarding thing is just a way to express what the director would do, a way to express how the thing's going to be shot. So ideally not, ideally it wouldn't seem like that. But I do feel like there's so opinions about how something when I'm watching something and how it works is is more about criticizing the directing,
right.
But I do think that there's a lot of that there's something that's been lost over the last several years. There's a lot of amazing TV, but since the director on television is a more functionary sort of position than on a film, there are a lot of things that end up being a little bit, we've fallen into a thing where, even really good looking television shows don't necessarily tell the story with the camera the way that they could, and don't necessarily, and often make odd choices that seem to me counterintuitive or pointless. I mean, there's in every time you watch a TV drama show, there will be a moment in some intense scene between two characters where we cut to a profile shot of one of the actors for no reason whatsoever. Like it doesn't serve any dramatic purpose. There isn't dramatic intention behind the way that it's shot. And there's a general sense of scattershot filmmaking out there at the moment, which is made possible because of digital, because of being able to shoot with multiple cameras and all sorts of other stuff like that. I mean, the profile shot comes from the multiple cameras, right? It's the editors are choosing that because it's there, but like it, what we're losing is an intention behind why we're shooting what we're shooting and what angles we're shooting it from. And so just thinking of it as a storyboard artist watching something, that's what I think about the most. That's what bothers me the most when I see something is when, there's no intention behind why we've put the camera someplace.
Right. It takes you out of it. It must take you out of it.
It takes me out of it.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, it takes me out of it when I see like a chair that I've rented a million times and I'm like, oh, Omega. Like,
there it is.
There it is. Yeah, right. There's a chair I've used. Oh, I know where they got that. I mean, I feel like I'm out of it all the time because I search for it. And more of a sense of like, oh, they used that like this. I would have never thought to use it like that, or oh, I did that. Yeah. Check. I did that.
Like, yeah. Well, I mean, another thing that I not to just only complain about things, but the other thing that takes me out of stuff, I'm not actually a big fan of shots that call attention to themselves. I don't think that you get points for being clever. I generally don't care about it's all in one shot, it's all one long shot. And so the audience sits there and appreciates that it's all in one shot. Who cares? I mean, it's not, I don't think that things should be, I don't think the audience should be thinking about that at all, and if you're thinking about how something is all in one shot, you're certainly not thinking about the movie or the emotion or what's going on. So I think that, I'm very pro cutting, and I think I'm much more pro cutting than everybody else is in the world these days when things can be so easily stitched together.
I noticed in rewatching Inception that I feel like there was just music on the whole time. Like it was almost overscored to me, and it took me out of it of like, man, there's never there's like maybe two silent moments in this. It's like really like you're just up, and I could see that with not having a cut. Like you're just the audience never gets a break.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that also might be particularly noticeable because that composer's work is now the template for virtually every piece of music that you hear in movies. I mean, everything has has an almost identical sound to it. So there's not a lot of variety in there's not as much variety in scoring as there was.
I'm glad,
or at least that sound is very fashionable.
I'm glad to hear that you're secretly working on something, because it does seem that there aren't a ton of movies anymore.
Things are not going well out there at the moment, and I'm sort of working on something. I mean, I'll work for a couple of weeks, every couple of weeks, because it's not really going forward yet. Right. It's I certainly feel fortunate to have anything going on though, because I know many, many other people, in my union and elsewhere, are not working at all. Yeah. So I'm happy to have just through prior relationships have a little bit of work to do throughout this.
That's awesome. Well, it probably gives you more time to work on comics and writing and other passions.
Yeah, I mean, in theory, although being creative during all of this has not been quite, I think pretty much I'm with everybody else when it comes to not feeling like I've been able to use any extra time I've had and have the inspiration to be creative, because everything in the world is unbelievably bleak.
Yeah. So, yeah. Yep. But you talked about Hitchcock and I'm assuming your mom had influence on you. Is there anything that you're watching now or that you've seen lately that influences you?
I've really enjoyed the German television show Dark that's on Netflix. I think that show is excellent. I also, which is even though I was slagging off TV shows there, I think that show's great. I was a huge fan of Parasite. And there've been, and I'm just a huge fan of, people, I think one of the greatest things about Parasite is that he was able to actually use the craft in a way that, that didn't feel like, I love suspense. I love, I love, being able to, create an emotion and a feeling out of nothing, kind of, that was very much what Hitchcock was. It was less about the, it was more about just the formal aspects of a film creating a feeling than a more literate script or something. So it's the form is the thing that is making the impact. And I think that when something's able to do that, that's what really excites me.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that film. I thought it was something different. I was like, as soon as I saw it, I was like, that's going to win because it's something different. People just want to, like, need something out of our little, either it's a Marvel film or it's like a low budget film is basically all that's out there. I feel those those.
Well, no, I mean, and it's not even, I mean, it's not just about feeling. I mean, the fact is there used to be mid-range budget films made that just aren't anymore. I mean, there are either giant movies that are based on IPs or there are movies made for, $100,000, and the fact is that you can't, there are very few of just even not great. I mean, there was a whole middle range of movies, thrillers and things that were not, they're not even necessarily the greatest movies. Yeah. But, I mean, it's, but things were more varied. And I do really miss that sort of thing. And I do think that, you can definitely tell a story for $100,000 in a film, but you're limited in every way. And time is the thing that, that everybody is bound by in making films. And if you don't have the time to tell the story in a crafted way, there's a whole strata of movies that are never going to be able to be told. I know. And I think that's sad. I mean, I think that I think that the TV stuff is great in a lot of ways in the way that it can, there's a lot more diversity in the subject matter and opportunities for different people to tell stories. But I think that it's still about the time you have to do it and the time you have to craft it that can get in the way of certain kinds of stories being told. Yeah.
I do like limited series, especially because it seems like it's just a mini movie. Like, at least you have an ending. Sure. And for someone who has worked on them and it's sort of like, oh, I know, like, this isn't coming back. Like, this is it. This is what we have to present. Like, this is what we have to show. And I feel like that's more and more in television now that you just have this, you have your rainbow and you have a beginning and an end and you're done. Like, it's not going to keep going and going. And I like that as like, oh, it's like a mini movie. This is cool. I mean,
Yeah. And having an ending, I mean, I'm a big believer in having an ending. I think that I'm not even sure it is a story if it doesn't have an ending. So I think that's, you can spin plates forever, but if you're heading towards something and you're able to pay that off over the course of your story, I think that's the most important.
Did you ever watch Lost? There was no ending. There was no ending.
No, I didn't make it through Lost. I didn't.
I think they made that up.
I figured it out. Yeah. I figured out we weren't going anyplace.
Yeah, I know. I stuck in through the whole thing, and it was sort of like, man, I feel like you cheated me a little bit. The pilot of Lost is phenomenal, but the whole thing, yeah. It wasn't.
Well, but setting up is a lot easier than paying off. So you can set things up and be very charismatic at setting things up, but when it comes to actually like ending something and it's the fact that your ending should have come out of what you set up in the beginning, no matter what. Yeah. So if you're just setting up stuff without an idea of where you're going, then you're probably not going to end any place good.
True. I've taken up an hour and a half of your time, minus my kids screaming.
We ended on talking about endings, so that's probably good.
I know, that was pretty good. I can't thank you enough. So let me ask you one more thing, though. Did you know Harold? Did you know him at all?
I did not. No. I was approached by Dan Raim, the director, through a mutual friend because, just to be somebody who represented, storyboard artists now, and I did work briefly with, when I was like one of the very first shows I did, I worked briefly with Henry Bumstead, who was Hitchcock production designer, and I have a little bit of a connection to that. And actually that stuff like that, even though, most of what Henry Bumstead did was complain about the goddamn liberals, it was, which was uncomfortable. It was still, it was still interesting. I like some of my favorite things about, being able to work in films are the times I've worked with or met people that were connections to like an old Hollywood, of some time ago, that that we can come nowhere near anymore. And so, meeting somebody like that, or even to another degree, even working with somebody like Ed Verreau, who worked on, Raiders of the Lost Ark and E.T. and stuff like that. Those things are, to me, some of the highlights of, and I didn't work with him, but I met Robert Boyle, who is Hitchcock's production designer, because he came and visited.
That's awesome.
One time when I think he was a mentor of Bo Welsh, and I worked with Bo Welsh multiple times, who's a great production designer.
Oh my God, he's phenomenal. I love Lemony Snicket's, by the way. That was like, I loved it. I mean, I don't know. I think it holds up too. even against the Netflix series, I think it holds up.
Yeah, I haven't seen the Netflix series, but I mean, it certainly visually, I think that worked well, and I liked working with all those people.
That's awesome. Oh, I think I exhausted you.
All right, that's fine.
This is awesome. Now, I told you that was interesting. I didn't know all those things about storyboard artists. I mean, even though I wanted to be one at some point, I didn't know. And Gabriel really just has worked on these incredible films. When I rewatched Inception, I thought, what 3 seconds of this movie wasn't storyboarded? Because it's really every sequence, I feel like, probably needed to be. The relationship you have to develop with a director in order to guide them visually along the film, because that's what you're doing. You're helping them visually. So I'm so glad I got to speak with him. I hope I get to speak to more storyboard artists, because it's fascinating. Oh, it's fascinating to me. I love it. Very nice guy. And sorry again about those little screams. I know it sounded like murder. I am sorry. I couldn't take it out. I'm sorry. This is the 50th episode of Decorating Pages podcast. So thank you so much for all of your support and for listening even this long in. If you're still listening, thanks. You're a true fan. And as a true fan, you probably should just click, review this. 5 stars. Right. No, thank you. I can't even believe I made it 50 episodes and people are listening. How kind of you. So thank you. Upcoming, I have AD director Jeff Rosenberg, who I've worked with for a while and is just such a fun guy, and is directing his own film that he's written and got the money together and directed. And I just thought listening to that process is, I just thought people would really want to listen to that. And as I said, next week, myself and production designer James Pierce Connolly will be reviewing the Emmy winners. So congrats to everybody, and tune in for that. I hope you got an earful. I'm Kim Wanup for Decorating Pages. There's still time to float in style. Stogie Floaty Luxury Pool Float. Available on Etsy, Amazon, and StogieFloaty.com.